Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. The sun is out. Can you see me? The sun is streaming through the blinds. I hope you can see me. Anyway, just a few further thoughts on this Canelo versus the excellent Turkey spat that's going on, because I did a couple of videos about Turkey al-Sheikh and one about the disagreement with Canelo. And a few other things popped into my head as I was reading your comments. Thank you for all the comments, but a few other things popped into my head. They're not necessarily new things, but they're things that I haven't mentioned before, but I think other YouTubers may have mentioned them, but I'll repeat them anyway. Number one is that Canelo definitely is cherry-picking his opponents, and since Bivol beat him, it's almost like he, as I said in a previous video, he's become aware of his own limitations. So he is getting older. He's by no means shot. He's a million miles from that. He's still extremely good. But obviously he ducked Benavidez and David Morrell with good reason. And then he had Munguia, and now he's got Berlanga, and these are not bad opponents. These are, they're good fighters, very good fighters. But they're not necessarily the threat that Morrell or Benavidez would bring along. And some people have said, well, so what? He's entitled to do that. Look at the man's resume. He's entitled to, pick a few easier fights. No, he's not. He's not. Do you know why he's not? Because he's got 3 belts. The IBF kicked him into touch. He wouldn't fight. What's the guy's name? Skull, wasn't it? William Skull. So the IBF said, no, we're having our belt back. And the other 3, no way on God's green earth will the WBC ever strip him. They won't even force him to take a mandatory. They didn't in the past. But nevertheless, if you've got belts, you defend them. You should defend them. Because whether you agree with someone who's a mandatory contender or not, whether you think they should be there, that is the rule within that ruling body. And if you want to hold their belts, you should abide by their rules. If you don't agree with their rules, fuck them off and go with another ruling body. But if you want to hold all these belts, you've got to, at some point, fight the mandatory contenders. Otherwise, you've essentially tied up the belts. Okay? So, no, I do not agree that Canelo has got the right to pick and choose and to fight lesser opponents and, everything's done his way. This is the arrogance that comes across with Canelo. Even something with regard to the Bud Crawford fight, he said things like, well, if I beat him, people will say he was too small. Well, what, you mean like Amir Khan was too small? You fought him, didn't you? And then there's the whole failed PED test, which to me is always going to be a black mark over his head. He was never punished for that. And also, the Canelo weight thing that existed and avoiding Golovkin until he felt he could take him, until he felt Golovkin had slowed down enough. A lot of fighters do this, but very few fighters are held in the high esteem that Canelo is, a national hero. And the more esteem that you bathe in, the wetter you're going to get. You've got, if you're going to hold yourself to that absolute high level, there are pressures on you. And you can't cut corners. Now, if you want to just pick and choose and you say, well, the belts don't matter, throw the belts away. Let other fighters have them. And stick around for, do your own gig. In a sense, Chris Eubank Jr. has done this. He said, well, I don't agree with that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And he's been slagged off for it. And yeah, his career has stalled, intermittently stalled. But at least he does what he wants to do. He says, no, I'm not doing that, I don't care about the money. I don't, I know my worth. I'm going to do this. Derek Chisora is another one, cut from different cloth to Eubank Jr., but at the same time, Chisora's like, you pay me what I'm worth. Remember when it was first mooted that he should fight Joe Joyce? And he said to David Hay, who at the time was managing Joe Joyce, if he beats me, you pay me £1. But if I beat him, I'm having your Tony Bellew purse. Of course, Hay didn't go for that. But when they did eventually fight, years later, he beat him. So managing your own career. Dillian White is another example. Managing your own career. Again, we're talking about the ship in the storm and having to navigate your way through it, but it does have its advantages. But if you've got those belts, you've got to defend them. Give the belts up. Canelo doesn't need the belts, does he? But anyway, that I've probably done a little video within a video here by talking about that. But I raise it because some people in the comments said, "Oh, Canelo's earned the right to do what he wants." In my opinion, not while he got the belts. No way. But as far as Turki Al-Sheikh's concerned, clearly we've got ego versus ego here, because Al-Sheikh, as I said in a previous video, he was very. He's been brought up to be revered by everyone, to be called His Excellency. He's a representative of the royal family, therefore he's very highly thought of. He has the royal family's ear. And everyone's kissing his ring, so to speak. So he's used to this level of, people being totally deferential and, waltzing into rooms and everybody bows and all this sort of thing. Then he comes across somebody who's just that's probably how he views him, as a punk kid from Mexico, and he thinks, this kid's telling me that he does things his way or not at all. No one says no to me. I'm not used to that. A bit of a mind blower. You imagine if you're always getting everything, like that spoilt girl in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Was it Veruca Salt? Was it the one who was always, I want this, I want that, and then she ends up, with all the other bratty kids getting ironed out. But it's that type of spoilt entitlement that is being displayed by Al-Sheikh here. Now, they can go at it, they can hate each other, they can love each other. I'm not in anyone's corner on Al-Sheikh versus Alvarez. I don't care, really. I'm not interested in little ego playground fights. Get on with it. But here's the thing, it might be bad for boxing. I think a few people have commented on this. I mean, G-Man, I think Hatman mentioned this in one of his videos, maybe Beats. A few of these channels that I watch have already touched on this. But the thing is, you want people working together. What you don't want is any kind of Cold War in boxing. And so far, Al-Sheikh has been a person who has brought people together, most notably, of course, Warren and Eddie Hearn. There was a complete Cold War going on between them. It was like the bloody Soviet Union and the US. I'll let you decide who's who. And never the twain shall meet. And then suddenly Al-Sheikh comes in, bangs their heads together, waves a shit ton of money under both people's noses, and suddenly they're doing a 5 versus 5 with another one to come, so Eddie says. And that 5 versus 5 was brilliant. I loved that card. I thought it was fantastic fun. Not just for the boxing, and the boxing matches were great, but the idea that it was Eddie versus Frank, and it all got a bit sort of pantomime, but at the same time there was some real substance under all the panto stuff, which I absolutely loved. So hopefully the second 5 versus 5 will be good. But the point is that Al-Sheikh brought them together, and he's made, because of his money, he's made in great fights. But to kind of ostracize Canelo and say, no, I'm not interested in that Bud Crawford fight anymore. And he could have phrased it in a bit more diplomatically. And this is where diplomacy, when we talk about diplomacy, we're really talking about the skill of showing humility and of, maybe taking a step back to take 2 forward. Al-Sheikh's not used to doing this. He's in the habit of, I want that here now, and suddenly it's there. And when someone says no, do you mean no? How dare you talk to me like that? It's like that in Gladiator, the Roman emperor. Don't turn your back on me. How dare you turn your back on your emperor? Maximus had other ideas, didn't he? Well, in this role, it would be Canelo, who's the Maximus, and Commodus would be Turki Al-Sheikh. But I think it's bad because if this is okay, he's done it with Canelo. Is he going to do it with other fighters? Once he gets everyone under an umbrella, and suddenly a promoter says, "Well, actually, I prefer this." What do you mean you prefer this? Are you saying no to me? It's that type of attitude. This is kind of part of the reason why I've always been extremely cautious of the Saudi involvement in boxing, even though it's produced some fantastic cards over the last year. You've got to bear in mind you know, the long-term effect of it and the cultural attitudes that go on. It's a very, very different attitude, very, very different. There are different cultural norms and mores, you know, in Saudi Arabia than there is in, you know, Western Europe, for example. Just as it's different, you know, if you go to Japan, culturally it's very different, or, you know, India. And I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. What I'm saying is, you know, you've got to understand how people do business. And I think it was also the fact that, I mean, Canelo himself is extremely arrogant. He said, you know, we do business my way. And Turkey Al Sheikh said, no, we don't. We do it my way. And no, we don't. We do it my way. No, we're doing it my way. You know, and then you get the standoff and the Cold War and all that nonsense, which is bad for boxing. Bad for boxing. So I do worry that little spat that he had with Canelo would spread in other areas, and suddenly we find a lot of roadblocks coming up between fights that we were hoping for. Yeah, and it's kind of like, well, Al Sheikh has. Some people say Turkey Al Sheikh has opened the door, or he's kicked it open. It's his right to close it, to take his money away. But that's another thing. You see, we get used to these big cards, these big mega fights, and suddenly when the plug gets pulled, you know, suddenly we're like, oh, that's no good. You know, what's going on? Oh, we have to go back to watching, you know, York Hall cards or Copper Box cards or whatever. Suddenly these great, huge behemoth bonanzas are not there anymore. And a time will come when that happens, when it happens. You know, it's like Premier League football teams. They get bought by some oligarch or whatever, you know, like Chelsea, the Abramovich era. They won everything. Now we got the Saudis with Man City there winning everything. And I mean, this is kind of why I checked out of watching Premiership football, because to me they're bought titles. I'm not interested in it being a huge money thing. I'm not, to be honest with you, and I'm certainly no nationalist, but I'm not interested in watching a load of so-called British teams that are owned by foreign entities, some of them hardly reputable, and you know, the vast majority of the players aren't even. To me, it's not even an English league or a British league anymore. Do we want the same sort of vibe in boxing? I personally don't, and I do worry that that will be the end result, because a lot of people like the immediate happenings, but they don't like they won't like the long-term result. They just can't see it because they're blinded by, you know, the kid in the sweet shop mentality, stuff in their faces, not realising they're going to puke later on. But anyway, I mean, those are two things. Yeah, those are the main two things that were raised in the comment section that I wanted to cover. And like I say, I've got no horse in this race, Al Sheikh or Canelo. I think they're both arrogant sods. So yeah, what do you think? Further comments below to these further comments on the excellent Turkey versus Canelo. And of course, if you're new, subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. If you like the video, hit the like button, because it's all good for the YouTube channel of Joe Stunner Boxing. Spread the word, build a channel up, you know. And yeah, I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Thank you very much, as always, for your time, and bye-bye for now.